One thing we didn't get to, or you didn't get to react to that evening was Ange Postecoglou's comments on VAR, and he said Premier League managers should just manage their football clubs. I have never and never will talk to a referee about the rules of the game. I was taught that you grow up and you respect the officials. We will be talking about Arsenal and Mikel Arteta in just a moment. But yes, Jimmy was booked in that game, though, wasn't he?
He was, yes, for doing something not dissimilar to what he just described.
I think he's maybe talking about going in to see the officials after.
Yeah, I think they're different incidents, aren't they?
Yeah, I think a bit of passion on the touchline, perhaps. I don't know, but he said a lot more.
It's all very lovely, isn't it? I don't understand why we can't just live, laugh.
Yeah.
But he also said a lot more. Did old Ange, and it was, old Pugmol probably couldn't believe their luck when he said that because if Howard Webb had have come out and said certain things, he wouldn't have said it like that. Of course, he couldn't.
He's saying he's a suck up.
No, I'm not saying he's a suck-up. I'm saying I think he's done the referees a solid there.
I think it's a curious situation, isn't it? Because people immediately, in my timeline at least, which has been horrific this last week, people jumped on and compared and said, because I retweeted saying, look, I think this is a refreshing thing to say, just as a standalone thing to say from a manager at the top level who's just had 2 players sent off, albeit fairly.
Yep.
That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, but managers, well, listen, would David Moyes say that? He would come up with some weird excuse as to why it shouldn't have been a red card, whatever. So take it in isolation. I think it's a really refreshing thing to say, which I retweeted and said, I thought this was interesting. I thought it was actually a nice thing for a manager to do after a game in which, they've just been beaten heavily at home against a rival, right? Because, emotions run high. Spurs against Chelsea is a big game. Then people immediately jumped on that and said, oh, yeah, but you can't compare it to Arteta because Arteta's team were on the end of a really difficult situation, which I totally accept. And I don't think I wasn't trying to compare them, and I don't think people should compare them. Just because one's the manager of Spurs and one's the manager of Arsenal and they're rival clubs, it doesn't. I don't think Postecoglou was saying that in response to what Arteta was saying. I think he was just saying, I think he's quite a clever bloke, and I think he was probably, if he was saying anything in terms of a subtext, he was saying, is it responsible for a host broadcaster to be asking me this, trying to goad me into putting more pressure on referees when referees get a lot of shit anyway? Yeah. And he responded to it really well. I think we have to look, and maybe we're partly guilty here because we're not a part of that, and we kind of sit adjacent to it, and we don't want to be part of that establishment, and we're not rights holders, and we never will be. So I do argue that it is different, and I think it's part of fair discourse in the type of show we make. But if you are a host broadcaster or the official broadcaster of a Premier League that has a responsibility to its referees and stuff, I don't think it's right that whoever it was comes up and the first question they ask is almost explicitly designed to pile more pressure on refereeing as part of a wider narrative in which they're having an absolute beast anyway. They're having a nightmare this season. We know that. We want to get it better. I don't think the fans jumping on board some mad conspiracy train every single time something goes against them helps either. And fans do have a voice. But broadcasters should have a lot more responsibility on this kind of stuff and just ask them about the game. The decisions weren't controversial. They're part of the laws of the game. The kid was on a booking and he got sent off. The other one was a straight red easily because Romero's got that in his locker and does it all the time. They're open and shut cases. You could maybe ask and say, obviously it made it much harder for you because of the decisions your players made to get sent off. Frame it that way by all means. Don't come in with all this kind of crap because you're just piling more pressure and making it harder. And then you're going to do the outrage machine on Monday night. On Saturday because it was a Monday. Asking about why referees are so bad. Well, partly they're so bad because you keep asking these questions.
It's a race for social media
massively
punching through, isn't
massively. The whole Sky Sports' whole Saturday morning output is expressly designed towards people of an age that don't watch TV so they can clip it up and put it online.
When you say partly they're so bad because of these questions, though, I mean, what do you mean by that? Because I think that they're separate things, aren't they?
So what
the
I
mistakes keep happening, and I don't think that's because of the.
So what I think it's a good question.
Being called out.
Yeah, what I think, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be called out, and they should be held accountable. But what I'm talking about is a wider discourse around how referees are spoken about and treated, and what's expected of them. And I think for the first question to be asked after a game, almost expressly designed to put more pressure and more scrutiny on them, when in this case it wasn't warranted, is irresponsible. By all means, off the back of the Arsenal game, it's a huge talking point. I have my opinion on what happened in that game in terms of decisions, and other people have theirs. But it's clearly a controversy. Like, it's fair enough, talk about it. In this case, there's no controversy. The referee didn't do anything wrong.
No, there wasn't any controversy. I totally agree with you. And there were so many talking points.
And it was a brilliant game as well.
And his his tactical response, if you like, I thought was the talking point of the game. If you could find a talking point of the game, of course.
Yeah,
Because, as you say, when red cards are obviously red cards, then do you really need to... What did you think of the red card? Yeah, it was a red card. Good. Yeah, so did everybody else. Brilliant.
yeah. And then there's no question about that.
Well, exactly.
I think also people are Arsenal fans. I mean, maybe I'm a bit biased, Jim, and you can fight the corner all you like, of course. But I've had a lot of Arsenal fans in my grill this week after what I said about the decision.
Twitter Arsenal fans.
Yeah, basically.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
That
Yeah,
been fun.
they're great lads. Yeah, they're great lads.
Good lads.
Good lads.
Wow.
And I think, and it's interesting as well. All the Newcastle fans now like me again after the couple of weeks ago when they hated me.
Yeah.
But
we do disagree with their ownership, though, don't we?
The reason why Ange Postecoglou is popular is because of the type of person he is. He seems like super honest, quite friendly, avuncular. People like him. It's not a fucking fawning over him because of anything other than the fact that he just seems like a good dude. And off the back of Arteta being really angry and actually really kind of, I thought, unhelpful.
Yeah.
I understand why he did what he did, but I think he did it in quite an unhelpful way.
And, yeah.
It just sets it against stark contrast between them.
The thing is, though, as you said, without sort of taking this unnecessarily too much of a lurch to one side, nowadays it's like someone is either 100% brilliant or 100% crap.
Yeah.
And the fact is,
Yeah.
Mikel Arteta has been great as Arsenal manager, and what he's done for them as a club, what he's done for that group of players, gave us a title race for the majority of last season against Man City, blah, 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 blah. As neutrals, we all enjoyed that, and as an Arsenal fan, Jim, I no doubt you enjoyed that.
Most of it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and so on. But it doesn't mean to say he's above criticism. And
No, of course
Arsenal,
not.
certain Arsenal fans in Twitter and other fans of other clubs, whatever relevant to their situation, Newcastle fans, we've enjoyed what they've done under Eddie Howe and so on, but we're critical of the ownership. Okay, it's not all that. Therefore, we don't hate Howe and the players. We don't suddenly hate Arteta and so on and so forth. But what Arteta did and his words and the way he reacted, it was ridiculous, quite frankly. It was very unhelpful. And it was disrespectful and embarrassing, I would suggest. But that doesn't mean to say I think he's an embarrassing individual. I don't think his passion on the touchline should be curbed, if you see what I mean. Maybe if he goes out the technical area quite a lot and so on.
Richard
That's a
Keys,
different thing.
bit of Richard Keys, that.
Richard Keys, yeah, exactly. But with old Ange Postecoglou, there is something like that phrase, he's a good football man, is often reserved for people who have done something quite disgraceful. Oh, but he really loves the game and he's given stuff to the game. It's like, well, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the scandal. Actually, the phrase, he's a good football man, should be reserved for somebody like Ange Postecoglou, because he is trying to keep it just about football, if you see what I mean, what happened on the pitch.
Yeah.
And he's saying, look, the referee's decision final, of course he's going to have a moan when he's on the touchline because passions run high. But actually, I thought what he said was a bit of voice of reason, which was much needed.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's his opinion on a question he's had put to him after his own game, but I think there is an absolute deliberate drawing of parallels between them from certain people. Gary Neville's a great example. He's quote tweeted that clip and
That
said
more, isn't he?
pure class or whatever it was, something like that. And it's a very deliberate drawing of parallels. Like Neville's kind of got this about him, isn't he? And there's a sense
and I suppose there's an element that you're not comparing apples with oranges because of what we said. What would be an interesting comparison is if exactly the same or a similar incident that happened to Arsenal, which could be interpreted a number of ways, happened to Postecoglou. So one of the sendings
which
off
is inevitable, isn't it?
Yeah, and that will happen at some point, and we'll see how he reacts.
And this is what I think is interesting that's being lost amongst it. So obviously the veracity of what Arteta said has become the story, and actually it has replaced this situation that we're getting all these terrible decisions, and the standard needs to be raised. And people are saying it's a tough job, but it's like astronaut is a tough job, so the standards have to be really high.
Yeah,
like the standards just have to be high
Jim,
on a tough job, and then it needs to be scrutinised.
But on that situation they're talking about there, in which case, and I agree with all of that, but Arteta shouldn't be burning through his goodwill on shit that isn't
On
a
that,
fucking cut and dried thing.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
like,
I agree. I think.
Do you have to worry about goodwill with referees? Who are
Well, no,
supposed to
but
be
what I'm saying
impartial?
is the issue with Arteta wasn't that specifically. The issue of Arteta was he was going big on three things he thinks happen in the build-up to a goal, arguably none of which were actually that controversial. One of them probably was.
Yeah, I think
the other
the
two
one
weren't.
was.
Well, the foul as well.
You can't separate the-
Ian Wright tweeted the picture, with Joel.
It's a
looking
picture,
like,
though, isn't it? He was already diving for the flipping ball, so
no,
don't
come on.
dive for the. I mean,
Also-
it's not a come on situation. I mean, these are 50. I don't care whether it was. I mean, if it had gone against us, I don't mind. But the situation is, they were just three decisions that were a bit 50-50, and fine, they were compounded by the fact they happened in very very short shot.
It's not the same as a Liverpool Spurs thing.
It's just
No,
not.
it's not,
It's just
it's
not.
not.
But the foul I was going to say is that photo that Ian Wright tweeted. Well, was that photo available for VAR? I don't think it was from the replay.
Well, as we mentioned the other day, I think that they had to speed through each decision because
They're
there were
under
3 of
pressure.
them. And obviously there's I don't know whether they looked at Joe Linton's arm or not, but they probably had to within that as well. So
Joe Linton's arm only arrived this morning. It seems like we found he's got arms now.
To put it into perspective, if they had been on the end of what Liverpool were on the end of, I wouldn't have been criticising Arteta. for
No,
this.
But the thing is, Arteta clearly feels aggrieved, and he said himself, this is, I think, a cumulative effect of lots of different things that have happened over time, and they've just got a little bit fed up with it. And yeah, of course, it's really explosive the way that he's, the way that he's delivered it. But I do think that it is important that these standards raise, and he might not have gone about it in the right way for some people's taste, but that pressure needs to be there. And Keith Hackett said a lot of inflammatory stuff this week about people getting phone calls talking about taking the pressure down and stuff. And personally, I quite enjoy that Arteta has turned us heel. Like, especially against you lot. We're the bad guys now. I'm enjoying that. And every time I blink, he's doubled down again.
It's VAR taking to its logical conclusion. This was always going to happen. This was always just going to erode any kind of authority on the pitch, and this is where we are now. But we're getting some good hits out.
But
you got some social media hits
3 points out of it, didn't you, Pete?
Certainly did.
I'll tell you what.
We'll be back for some more later on, probably.
Cheers for watching another fantastic clip from the Football Ramble podcast. Make sure you click like on this video and subscribe to the channel, which means you will not miss a single upload.